Good day to all of you and welcome to our third sequel of the topic Nature and Concept of Self. This time, we will discuss its last perspective, which is the nature and concept of self based on the psychological point of view. Let's begin our discussion to the concept of Sigmund Freud, which is the psychoanalytic theory of self. Sigmund Freud and his concept, the psychoanalytic theory of self. Freud's assert that the human psyche or personality is structured into three parts, tripartite as is stated. These structures are the id, ego, and superego, all develop at different stages in a person's life. Sigmund Freud has conceptualized human psyche as structured into three parts, namely id, ego, and superego, which basically has something in comparison with Plato's three components of the soul, which are the appetitive soul, the rational soul, and the spirited soul. Similarly, appetitive soul refers to the id part, while rational soul refers to the ego part, and spirited soul confers with the superego. These three structures are systems and not physical parts of the brain, although each part comprises unique features and contributions to an individual's behavior. They interact to form a whole. Accordingly, these three structures must always need to work harmoniously for us to gain happiness or just actions into all our endeavors. For the dominancy of one particular to id or superego without the balancing of our ego will lead to dissatisfaction or discomfort. Parts of personality. First one is id, also known as internal drives, also called intrinsic drives. It consists of the body's primitive biological drives and urges, which are concerned only with achieving pleasure and self-satisfaction. It lives completely in the unconscious. Since it is the system of our brain that pertains to achieving pleasure and self-satisfaction, its duty is to supply the necessities of our physiological needs, namely hunger, thirst, things that ourselves wish to gain, and others. It does not confer on the norms of getting things rationally or ethically, for its notion is just to acquire things for your own satisfaction. Id may also refer to our evil side, for it does not recognize others' rights in the manner of attaining things for yourself. The second one is ego, or the reality. It is the I part of the individual that gives him or her the sense of his or her own identity. The ego is the rational part of the personality. Ego refers to the rational structure of our brains, wherein it is the one responsible for the logical manner of acquiring things. It balances the context of our id and superego to the restrictions of all our actions. Our ego also refers to the neutral side of ourselves. Now let's move on to the third part of personality, which is the superego, also known as conscience. It is the part of the personality concerned with morals, precepts, standards, and ideas. The superego is also the critical faculty of the personality. Superego refers to the ethical part of our brain's structure. It mandates to the proper etiquette of achieving things and performing actions without compromising others' privileges. Superego is also our angel side, for it continuously reminds us to do all our actions in the righteous and just manners. One example of our action wherein they are all working harmoniously with each other is that when we feel hungry in the middle of a meeting. Our id part will tell our body to eat because we feel hungry. Our superego will insist that we should not eat for it is unethical to eat while the meeting is on progress. Our ego then will tell our body to eat immediately right after the meeting. By then, our body will respond by delaying the actions of eating until the meeting is over, although naturally we feel hungry. Freud also argues that the development of an individual can be divided into a distinct stages characterized by sexual drives. As a person grows, certain areas become sources of pleasure, frustration, or both. So here are the Freudian stages of psychosexual development. The first one is oral, from birth to the end of the first year. The mouth becomes the part of the body through which gratification is secured. Oral occurs during infancy, wherein an individual only uses his mouth to gain his satisfactions. When hungry, an infant tends to cry to be fed, while irritated, an infant will also cry to address his or her needs. An infant may also grab things once they wanted it, to ease up their satisfactions without consideration with the right thing or the wrong thing. Is it pleasant or harmful? For ego and superego was not still developed during this stage. It is said to be the dominant structure of their mind established during this stage of life. The second stage is known as anal or expulsive phase. From the age of 2 to 3 years, the child derives the feelings of pleasure or pain from defecating. It covers also the toilet training. At this stage, a child has the idea of delaying things that they wish to do. There are times that parents did not wearing them diapers, specifically at daytime, for the child is already engaged in the toilet training period. The structure system of ego was also developed at this stage of life. The third stage is phallic, from the age of 3 to 6 years. The child gets curious about his or her genitals and becomes attached to the parents of the opposite sex. The attraction of a boy to his mother is called an Oedipus complex, while the attraction of the girl to her father is called an Electra complex. At this stage of life, the child has already conscious about their gender. Boys do not want to play toys for girls, for they are aware that it is inappropriate for them, or vice versa. The structure system of superego was also developed at this stage of life. The fourth stage is known as the latency. From the age of 10 to 12 years, sexual motivations presumably recede in importance as the child becomes preoccupied with developing skills and other activities. At this stage of life, the child starts to develop his or her acquired skills. It is important that in this stage of life, parents must guide and support their child for the fully development and confidence of their chosen skills or talent. The last stage is known as the genital. It happens after puberty to death. The deepest feelings of pleasure presumably come from heterosexual relations. Development of companions such as best friends, groups, or peers were exercised at this stage of development. Attraction with their opposite sex also occurred during this stage, wherein the feelings of crushes or even the experience of being fall in love happens at this stage. At this stage, it is important for their parents to guide them in choosing companies that they were engaged with and the responsible handling of a boy and girl intimate relationships. Another psychologist that we are going to talk about is Erik Erikson and his concept of the psychosocial stage of self-development. Erikson was primarily concerned with how both psychological and social factors affect the development of individuals. Erikson has adopted the belief of Sigmund Freud. The development is characterized by a series of development of stages related to conflicts between two perspectives. He believed that you must hold both perspectives to achieve identity, strengths, which he defined as virtues. If Sigmund Freud formulated only 5 stages of life development, Erik Erikson has formulated 8 major stages of development, each posing a unique developmental task and simultaneously presenting the individual with a crisis that he or she must overcome. As defined by Erikson, crisis is not a threat of catastrophe but a turning point, a crucial period of increased vulnerability and heightened potentials. Accordingly, individuals develop a healthy personality by mastering life's outer and inner dangers. The first stage of development, according to Erikson, is trust and mistrust, which happen from birth to 18 months, also known as the age of infancy. It is from this stage that an infant doesn't acquire any ideas from the world that he or she is living in, and all the necessities that he or she must get only comes from their parents, especially their mother, or to some, from their primarily caretakers. Once an infant develops trust at this period, they will tend to become confident with the world and the people they live in. But once they are not, they will become fearful about the different persons that surrounds them. The next stage of development is autonomy versus shame and doubt, which happen during 18 months to 3 years old, or what we are also known as the toddler age. By this time, a child practices to become independent in some of his or her doings, such as dressing on their own and even toilet training. Once parents tend to give their support to their sibling at this stage, the child will develop self-confidence. If not, they will acquire the feelings of shame and doubt, for it will cause them to become dependent from all their actions. The third stage of development are known as initiative versus guilt, which happen during 3 to 5 years old, or the preschool years. At this stage, children learn to take initiative from some of the basic knowledge that they aim to achieve, such as, is it okay if I will do these things like playing a ball or other stuff that they wish to indulge? If they will be encouraged, they will tend to follow their interests, but once they reprimanded, they tend to feel guilt. The next stage of development is industry versus inferiority, which happens from 6 to 11 years old, also known as elementary school days. At this stage, children are aware of their interests and they want to show to the world as if they can do things right. Once they receive recognitions from their teachers and peers, they will tend to become industrious. But once they receive too much negative feedbacks they will tend to feel inferiority and lose motivations. The fifth stage of development is known as identity versus role confusion, which happens from 12 to 18 years, also known as the period of adolescence. At this stage, the adolescent wish to acquire their own personal identity and even social roles. They are doing this from engaging into different activities that may cultivate their interests in life. So goes in dealing with persons associated with their interests. Once they were allowed and properly guided on with their exploration, they will tend to find their identity. Otherwise, once they were not permitted and not guided, they will tend to come up with identity crisis and role confusions. The next stage of development is intimacy versus isolation, which happens from 19 to 40 years old, or the young adulthood stage. At this stage, an individual must come up for his or her goal of building his or her own family. For the opposite of it is living alone through the stages of your life. Achieving your goal at this stage may lead you to an intimacy of relationships, while failure to do such means self-isolation. The seventh stage of development is generativity versus stagnation, which happens from 40 to 64 years old, known as middle adulthood. At this stage in life, we began to feel comfortable as if we can use our leisure time creatively. Our main concern this time is the comfortability of our family's next generation, which refers to the preparations of our siblings. Another point of concern is our contributions to the community where we live in, for us to gain the good reputation that we wish to be achieved as we are preparing for the last stage of our life. Failure to do so means stagnation, wherein we continue to live uncomfortably up to our old age. The last and the final stage of development is integrity versus despair, which happens from 65 years old to death, also known as old age stage. For in this stage, we began to reflect our achievements and the reputations that we've gained from our family and community. The concrete and perfect executions of our goals during the previous stages of our lives makes up this stage to become successful. But failure to do will cause our life to become in the feeling of despair. That's all for our topic, the nature and concept of self. Thank you very much for listening.